Well, Minneapolis is still in a state of mourning and shock after the shooting death of Alex Pretti, and the conflicting accounts of how it all unfolded are adding to the ongoing unrest in the city. The U.S. federal government says Pretti was killed because he posed a direct threat to officers, but state and local authorities say that's just not true. And so do the witnesses who saw the shooting unfold. We're going to show you some of what they saw. You're about to see two different perspectives taken in the moments leading up to Pretti's being shot, and a warning that this video may be disturbing.
They're doing too much, man, and they keep pushing people, you know?
Now, we've frozen the shot right there. Have a closer look, because these are the moments just after when ICE agents fatally shoot Alex Pretti multiple times as he's lying on the ground. The Department of Homeland Security says Pretti was carrying a weapon and that officers shot him in self-defense. But local officials again say that the gun was legal. He was a legal gun owner. He had a permit for that gun. And they say he never brandished his weapon. Pretti was an ICU nurse. We showed you that footage just a few moments ago in a Minneapolis VA medical center. And the court records showed that except for some traffic and parking tickets, he had no prior history of police involvement in the state. This is a top story for us, and we want to stick with it and invite to the show Daniel Bruner. He's a retired FBI agent and the president of the Bruner Sierra Group, a forensic accounting and security firm. Mr. Bruner, thank you so much for making time for us today.
My pleasure.
Mr. Bruner, no doubt by now you've seen the videos that we've all looked at from multiple different angles. And taking into account, we don't know the whole story, but based on what we've seen with the video footage that has been made public, what do you make of what unfolded yesterday?
What I make of this is a group of reckless and ill-trained, poorly trained agents essentially murdered an individual, murdered a man that was there. You could see clearly from the video, Mr. Pretti was not impeding traffic. He was not impeding the agents. And Mr. Bovino, who's the head of Customs and Border Patrol, this morning said, well, he was getting up in the face of agents. And that can be easily refuted by just looking at the video when you see the agents go into Mr. Pretti's face. So they were making the situation worse. They were exacerbating the situation. Then the agents deploy pepper spray against a woman with a backpack and Mr. Pretti. He turns his back to the agent to assist the woman that was on the ground who had been pushed there by the agent. Then the agent grabs the back of Mr. Pretti's shirt, again, exacerbating the situation. He was not a threat. He was not a threat to the agent. He was not a threat to any other. He was turning to help the woman. They pulled him back, at which point the other agents arrived and they began to wrestle with him. At which point he was in a fetal position on the ground, face down, and you could see from video they saw the gun that Mr. Pretti legally had, according to Minnesota state officials. He was legally authorized to carry that gun. They removed the gun and from a gentleman with a gray jacket. Then the gentleman with a green shirt standing right next to him draws his weapon after the gun has been removed from Mr. Pretti. So there is no threat anymore. You cannot, as a federal agent, I received 20 years in the FBI, you cannot fire your weapon unless you can have an articulable threat that someone is threatening you or those around you. If that gun had been removed, that agent needs to justify why he shot that first round and then the 9 additional rounds after that by other agents. I think this was poor training. I think this was reckless. This was aggressive. And for me, I put this on the administration, that their poor trained officers are out there. They're aggressively approaching individuals. And I believe that this was it was a dangerous situation, which I predicted would happen. And unless something is changed, it's going to happen again.
So you predicted this was going to happen, and you think it's going to happen again. That's serious. So, Mr. Bruner, walk me through what led you to believe we were going to hit this unbelievably tragic point, and where you think it goes from here then.
Well, here's the thing is we're seeing today on the Sunday morning talk shows here in the United States, we're seeing a lot of these senior officials, Deputy Attorney Blanche, the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, other officials are going on there, and they're doubling down. They're calling this individual a terrorist. They're calling him a domestic terrorist, that he was the aggressor. Initial statements coming out of the administration within minutes of the shooting, without an investigation having been conducted, they were saying that the Mr. Pretti had his weapon brandished and he approached officers, which clearly was debunked within minutes. So everything that's coming out, that continues to come out from this administration, and is that they are denying it, that they are putting it on Mr. Pretti, that the agents were the victims. The agents were the ones who were the victims in the situation. The FBI investigation, whether it does move forward or not, is not being coordinated with the state and locals. When I was in FBI in New Jersey, if there was an officer-involved shooting, whether any level, federal, state, or local, the federal authorities were involved, and they worked hand in hand with state and locals. Almost like the previous shooting 2 weeks ago, they did not coordinate with the FBI in Minnesota, refused to coordinate with the state and locals. There's a refusal to cooperate. There is a refusal to accept that a mistake was made here. So I believe on the government's behalf, I think they're just going to double down. I think the rhetoric is going to continue to move forward. And then on the public side, the public is clearly growing frustrated. And in the United States, we have the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. The government is already coming out and saying, well, you shouldn't be carrying guns if you go to a protest. That's every American's right. If they're authorized in their state and they have the license, they're allowed to carry. If the government is now coming in and saying you can't have guns, they're impeding on the Second Amendment right. And I believe that there's going to be something's going to break here. So there's going to be an argument to be made.
Mr. Bruno, we are hearing repeatedly from members of the federal administration that this man was at fault and the ICE agents were just carrying out their responsibilities. If, based on what you're telling us, that is untrue, and let's say they're being untrue intentionally, what does that do for the public's trust in federal institutions?
Well, I think the public's trust in federal institution was broken 2 weeks ago when you saw a clear video of the institution. Now, in that first shooting 2 weeks ago, there could be an articulable threat because the agent fired their first round. That as the car sort of bumped into him, he could make the argument, but rounds 2 and 3, the vehicle was next to him. But regardless of the incident, the fact that Secretary Noem, within minutes of the shooting, was coming out, calling her a terrorist, coming to conclusions that are normally take weeks to come to a determination, calling her a domestic terrorist, calling him a domestic terrorist within minutes of the investigation. The people in the United States, I feel a large portion, don't believe the facts that they're being told by the administration. They don't believe, and they're being told not to believe their eyes, not to believe the video. When you clearly can see before the shooting, you can see Mr. Pretti walking around, letting traffic through, so he's not impeding traffic. He's not going up to the agent. The agents came up to him. He didn't obey their orders, and I believe that was one of the things that frustrated, that they wasn't obeying their orders of get on the sidewalk or get out of the way, and that he was being disobedient to them. So that is not a threat. You need to have an articulable threat to fire your weapon. If you're going to push him through a pepper spray, that's different. But to pull your weapon out and to shoot an individual, and the first round went into Mr. Pretti's lower back, into his back. If you cannot articulate that there is a threat to your life or to those around you, then you cannot fire your weapon. And then the other agents who started firing after that first round, they're also responsible. They have to be able to articulate and saying, I saw this threat. If Mr. Pretti had a second gun, which no one has said anything about, then that could be articulable. He had a second gun, or he was going after my gun. That could be articulated. But those all 10 rounds have to be accounted for. Each round is responsible to coming out of that weapon, that those officers have to say, I saw this threat in front of me, and I needed to stop the threat. Not to kill the person, to stop the threat. And I believe that all 10 rounds, there is no articulable threat based on the video that I'm seeing.
Retired FBI agent Daniel Brunner joining us today. Thank you so much for your time and your insights, sir.
My pleasure.